Hello there, I'm Chris Stashik.
And I'm Jess Byard.
And we are the hosts of The One Season Show, a podcast where we take a look at TV shows that only lasted once.
Each month we tackle several episodes of the show, and on this episode we are finishing our adventure with 1967's The Prisoner, with episodes Once Upon a Time and the final episode, Fallout.
Thank God.
You say every intro for like the last 3 episodes, you've just sounded more defeated and more defeated.
Well, and this is my breaking point because oh my God. So, well, let's just get into it. So, we're gonna have to talk about these episodes
together
in tandem. Yeah. So because they are.
For once, these there's a 2-parter that actually goes together.
Yeah, this is a 2-parter. The first episode, Once Upon a Time, aired January 25th, 1968. Fallout aired February 1st, 1968. The first episode is written, directed by Patrick McGoohan. The second episode is written and directed by Patrick. They're both directed by Patrick McGoohan. They're both written by Patrick. His name is all over these. The folks of note, Leo McKern returns as number 2. We also have Alex Canner, who plays 48. He was the young kid in the Living in Harmony episode who kills himself in that episode. And also Angelo Muscat is billed as a part of the episodes finally, the gentleman who plays the butler. Once Upon a Time has number 2, a former number 2 returning to the village to try and break number 6 once and for all. And then Fallout is the fallout of the breaking of number 6 in the previous episode. And Boy.
Well, now I wouldn't say that it's the breaking of number 6 in the first episode.
Here's the thing. You could interpret it as this entire second episode is a dream and that he went.
Well,
that is one accepted fan interpretation of Fallout, is in Once Upon a Time, number 2 broke number 6 and he went insane. Which I didn't get. I feel like that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah, I think so.
But that's a fan interpretation that I have read. It is not only on Wikipedia, but it is on several other places that is an interpretation of the finale of the show. Which I think, the show doesn't give a shit enough about its own finale, so any interpretation, I guess, is as good as the one that the literal images that they gave us on screen, which didn't matter to begin with.
Well, I mean, so reading about these episodes after we watched them, Patrick McGoohan went and I think it's the documentary Don't Knock Yourself Out, where he essentially says that the sort of message and overall idea of this show is that man is a prisoner unto himself, and you're sort of just destined to keep doing the same shit over and over again to spite yourself, or despite yourself. And even if you're wanting to move forward and do something different with your life, like, number 6 resigning at the beginning of the show and not wanting to be a spy anymore, but still he's consistently, pulled back in. So yeah, episode 16, Once Upon a Time, is essentially what it is number 2, returning McKern, basically runs number 6 through this sort of like series of last-ditch efforts to like regressive therapy tactics. So he puts number 6 in like a trance, and at the very beginning, number 6 is regressed all the way back to being a child. So the very beginning of this episode is number 2, and because the opening is different, correct, for this episode? So we start out with number 6 as effectively a child. So we're in this weird room under the dome that's like an oversized, not amusement park, but playground with seesaws and swings and teeter-totters and all kinds of shit. And it just keeps, one experiment after the other as we have a situation. It's always a posing number 2 is in a position of authority over number 6 at whatever brain state he's at. So at one point in time, there's like a sort of a prisoner of war type, situation. And they're all geared to getting number 6 to tell why he resigned. And of course, none of them work. Eventually, I guess he gets his mind back, and number 2 kind of has a breakdown, and I guess dies. And number 6 demands to see number 1, and then they say, yeah, okay, sure, finally. Like there's no more, like this is the ultimate final test, I guess. And supposedly number 6 won or beat it or whatever in theory as to how he's, how he's led to be believed anyway. And he is taken even further down, and that's kind of when we just kind of slide into episode 17, which is Fallout. Because episode 16, for a good majority of it, is number 6 acting like a child.
Well, number 2 is using regression therapy.
Yeah.
And he's regressing him, like you said, to a childlike state. And this is all based around Shakespeare's 7 ages of man.
Right.
So it's an interesting premise, but again, I think it comes back to, for me, they don't explain. I mean, I had to go and read on Wikipedia, and I shouldn't have to do that.
There's a lot of, I guess, references and things in here to, if you aren't super brushed up on British lit and, philosophy and history, then you aren't, going to catch all of these things. And I'm not, I can't say that I caught everything. I also, found out that a bit of information reading on Wikipedia. And I don't mind references and things like that, or allusions and things like that. This episode 16 is just so scattered and, hectically edited and nonsensical.
I mean, the thing is, it shouldn't have been nonsensical, right?
But evidently during this, specific episode, what's his name?
Liam McKern had a fucking heart attack.
Yeah, well, differing accounts whether or not he had a stroke or a heart attack, but yes, because of how intense, I guess, filming this was. And then they also said that he and Patrick McGoohan were both so into their roles and what they were doing at this point that they used I believe they said the actors were in a psychotic state.
Near psychotic state, yeah.
Yeah. Which, I mean, you can kind of feel it. This episode does have a lot more energy than a good majority of the last few we've watched. Because the last few we've watched just felt as they were for filler episodes, and they felt very flat, and they felt just kind of like everybody was phoning it in while they were there. But even though this episode is pretty, like I said, nonsensical, and it doesn't really matter up to this point, but it did at least have some entertaining qualities to it. It at least was, what I appreciated most about the last 2 episodes is that it at least decided to fully commit to the absurdity and surrealism of it. I just wish if it was going to do that, it did it earlier in the game.
Yeah, I agree.
Because as we slip into episode 17 here, things just get really absurd.
Yeah, I like the idea of degree absolute being, it's dangerous for not only the person who they're trying to use it on, but the person who's doing it. And, I mean, that's what happened, is the degree absolute backfires, and number 2 ends up being the one affected more by it.
Right, that's what they refer to as these sort of trials that number 2 is putting number 6 through, the degree of absolute. It's effectively a to the death situation of one of us is going to have like a mental psychotic breakdown and die effectively.
Right. And so number 2 seemingly dies. Sure. Mm-hmm. Again, there's fan interpretation that number 6 is the one who actually, has a mental break, and then everything from, 16, the end of 16 onward through 17 is him having a mental break. Mm-hmm. Whatever. I didn't interpret it that way. And I think if that's what it is, that is as bad as what they did on the episode The Girl Who Was Death. It's all a dream.
And I don't feel like that is what it is just because of the fact that Patrick McGoohan is saying, like, and when we get like through to the very end part, but it's essentially just like he more than likely doesn't escape the village, but
well, we'll get to our personal interpretation. Yeah. So number 2 dies, mm-hmm. And then number 6 goes, I want to be shown to number 1. Yeah. So supervisor shows him to number 1.
Yeah, just like that, finally. I guess just because this was the final test, so fine, he wins. But it does just kind of feel like, oh, okay, now all right, we ran out of things.
So they go to number 1, which is seemingly a giant metal cylinder with an eye on it that says 1.
Well,
that's what we're led to believe at the beginning of the episode.
Right.
And where this eye is, there's a supervisor played by Peter Swanwick, and a president played by Kenneth Griffith, and there's this kind of delegation of all these like masked folks, and number 6 is sitting in the center, and he has apparently won the test, and he has the right to be an individual. Mm-hmm. The show has completely gone off the rails, right?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? I don't hate the idea of this whole, like, you won your right to become an individual, like, as what they're doing. I get that because there's a point in this episode, so he ends up down in this bunker type area, which I actually thought looked really cool. I thought the set design and everything, again, it's just as good as what the village looks like up top, but because it's subterranean and it's new, we haven't seen it. It was just really, it was refreshing to get a new area to be in. And I thought that it all looked kind of interesting. And I mean, it's all this weird mix of black metal and shiny metal and, steam and all kinds of different, machines and stuff that you don't really know what they're doing. They probably really don't do much, but there's all these people working there. And so, yeah, when we go down there, we kind of get this weird eyes wide shut kind of deal where there's all these people in these hoods and these white hoods and white robes, but not in like the KKK kind of way. In more of an eyes wide shut way, just not black robes. And they have these sort of dual, tragedy masks on, and I liked that. I thought that was all really interesting. And then, yeah, number 6 comes up to one that has a number 1 on him, and he reveals that it's him.
Well,
but
okay, so so number 2 who dies.
It looks like
number 2 who dies comes back.
Yeah, they rewind him essentially, and I mean that like they rewind him on a screen, and then he's back to life, I guess.
Well, and this had been filmed so much later than the previous episode that like almost a year had passed. So episode 16 was the 6th episode that was produced. Episode 17 was the 17th episode that was. So they literally had like 11 episodes that they produced in between those 2 episodes. So Leo McKern looked different as it is. So you could actually notice if you watch when they put the shaving cream on his face and they bring him in there that it is a fake beard on his face, which is super.
Yeah.
So they bring number 2 back. Number 2 turns out that he is a prisoner just like everyone else. Number 2 and number 48 are escorted away. And then, like you mentioned, number 6 goes into a room where there's a masked person watching the proceedings, wearing the button that says number 1. He pulls the mask off. For some unknown reason, there's a monkey mask?
A gorilla mask?
And then he pulls that mask off, and then it turns out that it looks just like number 6, which is never explained. And then this figure who looks like number 6 runs away from the area that they're in. He goes up this hatch and runs away, and then number 6 is seemingly stuck inside of this rocket. And
like in Once Upon a Time.
Well, like the girl who was deaf.
Oh yeah, the girl who was deaf, not Once Upon a Time.
Which by the way, they reused the set from that episode, which is why.
Right.
So he launches the missile. Everybody goes into a panic. Number 2, number 48, and number 6, along with the butler, escape. They drive away, and the village evacuates, and Rover is destroyed, and the Beatles play for some reason.
Yeah, there's a weird amount of music in this last episode that... So when he's going down into the, subterranean lair, you hear All You Need Is Love playing, and I was like, wow, budget for this episode, evidently. Now, I don't know how much it costs to license a Beatles song in 1968. Might have been, yeah, that's true. To keep the license is the bigger issue. And then we have the other song that's very prevalent in this episode, which is Dem Bones. Your neck, hip bones. Yeah, your hip bones connected to that fucking song. That's a whole song, evidently. And for some reason, number 48 is just singing it as sort of like I guess like to taunt, the village superiors and to kind of make a mockery of them. And it takes up a weird amount of time and has a weird amount of like screen time, like screen space. This song does. So the reason that I don't think that this is like, that it is Patrick McGoohan, like that it is number 6 is just that reading after the fact, because again, nothing is told to you in this show. Everything that all the interpretations and everything that Chris and I are talking about are things that we've read outside of this show, because nothing is, in my opinion, answered really. But Patrick McGoohan was saying that because of this whole idea that the overlying theme and message is that man is a prisoner unto himself, and that no matter what you try to do, you're doomed to just kind of keep repeating the same thing. And that when he reveals the other, number 1 is number 6, it's not fully him, it's his other half. Like, it's all of the bad stuff that he's been trying to avoid. So like the whole idea of violence never pays off, which is hilarious because in this episode, like,
they gun down people.
They gun down pretty much everyone. Patrick McGoohan does, because once he starts to launch the rocket, it sends off this panic alarm of evacuation throughout the village, and everybody's trying to, evacuate. Obviously, Rover gets totally deflated by exhaust fumes.
I guess so, sure.
Which, I mean, it is a balloon, so yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's supposed to be sort of this like duality thing of it's just his other half, his good side versus his bad side.
It's more allegorical nuns, courtesy of our friend Patrick.
Right. But if this had only been 7 episodes, I think it would have been much more palatable, allegorical nonsense versus 17 episodes straight of it. Yeah, man. And then they end up in London, and
which, by the
basically
way, now they can drive to London, even though they said that the village was in like the Atlantic Ocean north of the African coast.
Okay, but where did the rocket go?
It's just
number 6 is in a rocket. Number 6 is in a rocket. He flies away, and then all of a sudden, we're in London, and it's him, this butler guy that has appeared in this episode, number 48 and number 2, are all now in London. And they drop number 48 off in just like the middle of the road, and he just starts to hitchhike for some reason. And then we go back to London. They get stopped by the cops. They all go their separate ways. And Patrick McGoohan is taken by the butler to his apartment where his car is there. He gets in the car, and essentially the opening credits sequence starts.
You forgot to mention.
And so
the door at number 6's house makes the noise that the doors make at the village.
Exactly. And that's why I'm saying, I'm of the mind that he's still in the village. That this was just even yet another more elaborate thing to make him lose his mind. And I think that this one maybe worked.
I'm of the mindset that he escaped, but that noise is this subtle nod to, if what Patrick McGoohan wanted was, you are trapped in your own mind. Mm. Well, not you are trapped in your own mind, but the duality of mankind. You are, a man is a prisoner unto himself. I think that noise
the cyclical nature of everything.
Yeah, I think that noise is just a subtle nod to the idea that even though he has escaped, he can't escape himself.
Right.
Which, I mean, it's, whatever. The village is a construct of our mind. Look.
And see, you know what? I get it, and I don't mind that allegory. I really don't. But honestly, this would have been, if the prisoner was something framed in like a Black Mirror or a Twilight Zone episode or like series where maybe everything is set in the village, but it's different stories. And then this whole number 6 thing was one story on its own. That would have been fine. Like if it was just, the Twilight Zone is effectively just a bunch of cautionary tales too. That's what it is. But they're all individual stories. We're not trying to also piece together a narrative as an audience, as, you're just inclined to do. And maybe we're more inclined to do that than people who would have been watching this at the time, because of how we've talked about TV is very different for us than it was back then. And if a show's not posed in a way that, you're supposed to know that it's not meant to be taken as a direct narrative and more taken to be as like bite-sized, then I mean, I guess that's more of a failure on the show for not communicating that. But yeah, I think that this is just, every episode is just a more and more elaborate way to try and get number 6 to break, and the last 2 episodes are the ultimate. And I guess, you know what, if that's what the show is, then it did succeed, because these last 2 episodes were totally absurd. I mean, I was laughing hysterically at one part and this, like, just when everything starts to really go down in the final episode. But that's what I wish that they had leaned into that absurdism and surrealism harder in more episodes than just leaving it into these last 2.
Do you want to know who feels like the prisoner to this in this show? It feels like we were the prisoners to the show. It feels like the show held us hostage for way longer than it needed to. And that's the case.
Like you want to know.
And look, you know, if you listen to interviews with Patrick McGoohan after the fact, the audience response was so poor that he hid in the mountains for 2 weeks until it calmed down. And you know what? If the show was as big of a hit in the United Kingdom as I assume it was, and it still is an important piece of fiction to come from the United Kingdom, I don't blame people for being upset, because this episode sucks. It really does. And the finale of this show sucks. It really does. I mean, it's not making me as angry to go, like, you know, go defile Patrick McGoohan's grave. Or, you know what I mean? Like, these people were angry to the point of, like...
Right, like sending death threats and shit. I mean, people do that now.
Yeah, sure. I mean, times haven't really changed in that respect when it comes to
No, it's just much more direct now.
Yeah, but my point being, like, this finale to this show lived up to how bad I expected. 100%.
Yeah. I mean,
it just shirks everything it shirks even its own themes with wanton abandon. All of a sudden, they're just killing people with machine guns.
Well, okay, that I do have an issue with, because I don't understand the whole...
I don't understand most of it is the problem.
Well, I mean, okay, yeah, fine. Like,
why is the island where it is all of a sudden? Like, why is the village all of a sudden close to London? Why are they killing people?
Well, because he didn't actually escape and he's still trapped in the village, Chris.
Yeah, but that's not the case, because the show...
But I think it is.
But here's the thing. The show is way too... The show in and of itself has in the past made it very clear when they don't escape versus when they do escape. And it's pretty clear that they escape.
I don't know. I don't think they do.
But why would number 2 escape them? And why would number 48 escape?
Well, but number 2 always goes with them in these weird escapes. Like, they always appear in the real world. I don't have any answers for 48. That's just a weird thing. I just do think that this is just a continuation of building and building and building on, like, elaborate ways to try and break number 6's mind, and absolutely 100% making him believe that he got out for sure would be the way to do it, or at least, you know, would be a way to try and do it as they have before.
No, I get it.
And this has been I don't know. I do think that it,
with Patrick McGoohan being Mr. Allegorical and trying to say, well, he got away, but even though he got away, he's still a prisoner to his own mind and his own psyche. And I think that that's what he's going, like, that is 100% what he's going for, because he seems very much dead set on this show being a massive allegory. Massive.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I would like to know, and when we are going to do like a follow-up episode where we talk about some documentaries and stuff. So I am interested, I'd be interested to know what Patrick McGoohan's, you know, what his inspirations and things he was drawing off from were, you know, was he a fan of the Twilight Zone? I don't know. I would want to know some of those things. And I think that, you know, honestly, what it comes down to is The Prisoner is extremely flawed. It is not a cohesive story. And yeah, it leans real heavy on allegory, but I think that it was probably something, I mean, it seems very evident that it was extremely personal to Patrick McGoohan. And I think that it's, you know, I think we mentioned this before in another episode where somebody on crew mentioned that they think that this was just Patrick McGoohan having a mental breakdown on paper and, you know, or, you know, a midlife crisis or whatever on paper. And I can see that, you know, being the case. I think that there was probably some stuff in here that he really did truly believe in, but it just didn't, because 10 episodes had to be shoehorned in, you know, within a story that he himself, you know, thought was complete and was only supposed to be 7 episodes. So there's that. And interference with studio, interference with other talent, interference with other writers. It's, again, there's a reason he probably never wanted to talk about this show anymore, because it didn't turn out at all how he wanted it to be. And it seemed like it was something that was probably very important to him in the long run.
I think ultimately this is the real truth behind all of this is, does it matter if either of our interpretations are right? This episode is a failure.
I mean, yeah.
Your interpretation of him not ever escaping, my interpretation of him escaping but still being a prisoner to his own mind, they're kind of the same outcome either way.
I don't know if it necessarily is a failure, though, because it's on par with the whole rest of the show.
Which I would consider the rest of the show to be a failure.
Wow.
Because I think that yes,
it only lasted one season, so you would not be wrong.
Do I? Well, yes, I understand that the show was, summarily dismantled and put back together in a different form by a studio and other things, co-creators, whatnot. But that doesn't change it. That doesn't change the fact that this is what we got and this is what we watched. All the excuses and reasons aside, they still filmed it, still put it out. Patrick McGoohan's name is still on everything. I'm sorry, that is the way it goes.
Oh well, yeah, you're not gonna shoot something and then not put it out.
Well, Patrick McGoohan took his name off of some episodes. Why didn't he take his name off? Why didn't he just disavow it completely?
Because like I said, I think that there's some things in it that are very personal and important to him that are in these shows and in this show. And what I think it comes down to is it's sort of, it's one of those sort of creations that the artist creates merely for themselves. And they have, the added benefit of disadvantage, depending on how you view it, of having an audience to also view it in.
I get it. I mean, again, I think that this show is a massive failure because you could see it as a missed opportunity, but I
see it as a massive missed opportunity.
Yeah, I see it as that too, but I also see it as a failure because I think massive failure and missed opportunity they're in the same kind. They're the same head of the same coin, or they're different sides of the same coin. But the question becomes, what is the thing that separates one from the other? Missed opportunity means there's still stuff to like about the show, and there's some interesting ideas. They just don't land all of them, or in this case, the show almost any of them. And a massive failure is something that feels like it spun its wheels and was making excuses for why it wasn't good. And while, like you said, there are 7 episodes of the show and there are 10 that were, quote unquote filler or quote unquote extraneous, I find a hard time, sitting and saying, well, that's a perfectly fine excuse, because even the 7 episodes that we did get, which, I mean, again, when we talk about our order and everything else, it's not like I'm sitting back and going, there were 7 episodes that I would rewatch in a heartbeat. There's like 3. And so there's 3 episodes. There's supposedly 7 that are the ones that are the quote-unquote canon that Patrick McGoohan wanted to be the 7. But I only remember really enjoying like 2 or 3 maybe. And in my mind, that's less than half of the episodes that were supposedly great or part of the actual straightforward story. So in my mind, it's a failure. And I think it's unfortunate. I mean, all of the reasons aside for why it was a failure and everyone pointing fingers at one another and saying, it was you, no, it was you, like, doesn't get anybody anywhere. Because ultimately, it's like anything else. Success has many fathers and failure is an orphan. No one's going to take responsibility for the show being a failure. Especially not Patrick McGoohan. Especially not George Markstein. Especially not ITC. No one's going to take credit, and everybody's going to point fingers at each other and say, it's your fault. McGoohan will blame everybody else. Everybody will blame McGoohan. And there you have it. And then everybody blames the American. So it's a failure because no one will even take responsibility for the show not being good. Come on. Someone take fucking responsibility for the show being a failure. No one will.
Yeah, I don't know. I still fall on the line of it being a missed opportunity because I do find things to like in it, and I do find things interesting in it. And I do, yes, agreed that, sure, there are a lot of circumstances that went into making it bad, but, that's still, that's the fault of the people who made it bad. You did something and it didn't work out. I just don't think that it didn't entirely work out. I think that, as a stepping off point, it opened a lot of doors. I think as an experiment, it was, extremely, it was extremely ambitious for 1968, 1967. And
you can be an ambitious failure, right?
Well, yeah. People fail upwards all the time.
Yeah, exactly. But just because it's an upward failure doesn't mean it. In my mind, just because it's an upward failure doesn't mean it's a missed opportunity. It was just an upward failure.
But there are good things to like in it. I don't know.
I'm not disagreeing with you. The problem is those things are so drastically outweighed by everything else that in my mind it's just like I would rather watch something else that does those things better and just go, yeah, this show had a hand in shaping that, but so what?
And again, I think it also comes down to tolerance and taste. For, like I said, I would rather watch episodes of The Prisoner again than episodes of Kitchen Confidential again, because that's not my style, really. It's not, for a show that is a show that I wouldn't otherwise have watched. I enjoyed it for what it was, but it's still not something that, again, is in my wheelhouse and that I keep going back to. Now, weird, enigmas of shows, and I am kind of occasionally entranced by, spectacular failures. I find, I don't know, I would rather have this on in the background with its weird shit just happening. And yeah, as a narrative, it's a total failure. As a constructive story, it's a fail. But as, as something committed, I don't think that it's a waste of film. I personally don't.
I think a lot of it is a waste of film when you have 6 or 7 episodes in a 17 episode long show.
I think 10 of those episodes are a waste of time.
I think more than 10 are a waste of time because I think a lot of the episodes do the exact same thing over and over again in a way that is neither interesting nor exciting the first, second, third, or fourth time they did them, or fifth.
See, the reason I feel like it's more of a missed opportunity is because I feel like if they didn't have to waste time figuring out 10 more stupid episodes, they could have spent more time on the 7 episodes making them better and fleshing them out.
Yeah, but that's giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I can't.
Well...
I don't think I can with this show anymore.
Well, that's up to you.
I agree. I think again, you have a creator who, Patrick McGoohan, God rest his soul. Patrick McGoohan clearly was trying to do more than just tell a story about a former spy.
He tried to do too much.
Yeah.
He needed people to help him rein in. He unfortunately didn't have people to help him rein in, and this is what happened. You put together a team. It either works or it doesn't. Unfortunately, a lot of the times it doesn't because people are fickle and it takes a lot of different hands to do shit like this. And if you have everybody, like you said, wanting to point fingers and blame and rather than actually being committed to things, then yeah, you end up with situations like this.
Which is exactly what happened. Patrick.
Right. You have too many cooks in the kitchen.
Blamed everyone else.
Too many chefs, too many people who want to be like in charge of or have their name and be like, this was my idea, but then doesn't, want to. And that's just that happens with a lot of shit. But I don't know. I still find this show, I'm glad this show does exist because without it, a lot of other shit might not. Again,
that you won't get a disagreement out of me on that one.
So.
But at the same time, the shows that came along did it better.
Yeah, but the cars we have now are better than Model T, so.
Yeah, sure. But at the same time, no one looks back at the Model T and goes, that was an amazing car.
They
just look back on it and go, this is a means to an end. That's what this is, right? This show was a means to an end, was it not? It was a means to get something more.
It was a door opener.
Yeah, it was a means to get something more down the road. And this isn't it. And look, again, to me, and you and I very rarely disagree on anything. And, this is the first time that you and I have very much disagreed on anything. But I didn't like it. And, the sad thing is, I remember the first episode we recorded, it was I was so excited for this show and so excited for the prospect. And yeah, it ended up completely losing sight of what made it good by the end of the show.
Well, maybe
that's the show's fault. That's the show's own goddamn fault, right?
That's true.
Whose fault is it?
There are plenty of episodes that I was like, oh my God, please just end. And also, the pace that we're watching them. We've been watching them pretty consistently for a while. And, yeah, I don't know. There's, especially being a horror fan, I am probably maybe a little lenient on things.
I'm lenient. The issue is not leniency. It's 17 hours of TV and 3 episodes are good.
Yeah, I wonder if any of those three the extraneous 10, or were they all?
See, that's the problem. like when I phrase it that way to you, you understand my point. It's like there's 17 hours of television, okay? 17 hours of television. Let's put that in perspective for people. 17 hours of television. What could you watch in 17 hours? You could watch 2 of the 3 seasons of Westworld. You could watch the first almost 2 seasons of Game of Thrones. You could watch the first 2 seasons of Dexter. You could watch the first almost 2 seasons of The Sopranos.
About season and a half. They're 13 episodes each.
Yeah, and so I mean, you can watch a lot of really
don't get me wrong.
television.
There's a lot better stuff to watch. But also we have to understand, we have to kind of, this is our own doing and picking shows that we know only lasted 1 season. So they are kind of doomed probably to fail in plot eventually.
I mean, it depends. I mean, look,
it depends on why they got.
I would say, as much as I wasn't a fan of Werewolf was more of a success than this show, which is
narratively.
I would think narratively, yeah, because
narratively fine, quality
was consistently bad, right?
Yeah, I mean, well, because it fell in it's another one like this where it's a very formulaic show. The Kitchen Confidential has its own problems with formula, but it doesn't quite feel like every episode is samey, is as samey as this and Werewolf were.
Kitchen Confidential has its own problem.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
all these shows are going to have problems.
Yeah. Well, Kitchen Confidential had the problem of also Kitchen Confidential had the problem of not being really, not quote, with the times.
No, yeah. There are a lot of,
There's a lot of things in Kitchen Confidential that had not
problematic
well.
things. No. And I guess that you can't really say, this show, The Prisoner, is pretty devoid of anything like that because it's just about number 6 and this whole same thing.
It's written by Patrick McGowan, who's a devout Catholic who seemed like a no fun Nick of the highest order.
Right, exactly.
This show, when it's created by one person, as this show seemingly was, it's very indicative of its creator. And Patrick McGowan, same guy who turned down James Bond because he was too promiscuous, seemed like a kind of rather boring, stiff upper lip British gentleman.
Yes. Yeah, and that definitely comes down to it too. Like when you have people who are these writer-directors, their voice and their style comes through, and if they're the type of person they are is going to come through, the type of energy they are is going to come through. So yeah, no, this show definitely has faults. I don't disagree. I liked it a bit more than you did.
Sure, yeah. I mean, like I said, and there is an entire community of folks online devoted to this show that love the show.
Yeah, there's 4 documentaries.
Yeah, I mean, I can't understate how much this show means to a lot of people, and I can't understate how important this show is to, I think, television, pop culture as a whole. But at the same time, I don't think it's a successful show.
Mm-hmm.
But again, there's a lot of things that came of this show. But I would love to see a version of this where it was all exactly what McGowan wanted, and then at the end of that, if it was pretty much what we got here, minus the 10 episodes, my response would be the same thing. Okay.
Right.
Well, you changed nothing, Patrick McGowan. It's the exact same nonsensical allegory that you already put on screen for.
Right.
So.
But it also would have only been 7 hours worth.
Sure.
Which may have, that may have been a little less, aggrieved because you didn't have 10 extra hours.
Sure, no, I completely agree.
On it.
I mean, there was episodes of this that we recorded where it felt like a slog because the episodes that we were watching were just so bad.
Right, because they very clearly didn't care on some of those. So, but we have finished yet another season.
One of these days we're going to watch a show that's just really good.
And be like, why did it get canceled?
I mean, as much as I love Kitchen Confidential, I'm talking something that blows us away.
Right.
We haven't seen that yet.
Nope, but we are still a young show.
This is still only the 3rd season of the show, so they could be coming at some point. Yikes.
Yep.
What was with the monkey mask?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't get that. I don't. Although, I didn't hate it because it that whole end sequence had very Roger Corman elements to it that I appreciated hardcore. Mask of the Red Death, the Roger Corman, Vincent Price movie. I don't know if you've seen it or not, but there's a point in it where this man is dressed up as a gorilla, and then he's sort of by Vincent Price's character, made to act like a gorilla. And it's just this really weird, unsettling energy that's really kind of surreal and absurd. And I got that out of this too, which is why I kind of enjoyed the, I I guess when the shit hits the fan, essentially, when everything just starts to melt down and Patrick McGoohan starts gunning people down. Yeah, I don't know specifically why a gorilla or monkey mask was there. I don't know. It's kind of like a Scooby-Doo thing. It's like, now I'll reveal who you really are.
I mean, was there anyone in the audience's idea that the reveal was never going to just be that he was number one?
I mean, probably not then. In 1967,
was there ever
that was not a common trope. Not really, no. Like, I assumed that it was either that or that it was a dream. Like, honestly, I would have been more mad at this show if it ended the way that, Girl Who Was Death ended. If it was just Patrick McGoohan telling his child a bedtime story as he, like, kisses his wife goodnight or whatever. That would have pissed me off. But, no, I mean, I just assumed that it was probably something like that or something as, you know, low-hanging as that, especially knowing that it's an allegory and allegories are supposed to be, they're usually pretty ham-handed and, you know, simple because they're supposed to be, because they're, you know, stories for everybody. Everybody can understand. This show is not simple.
No.
So this is probably one of the most complex. I mean, it's not when you look at it, when you really look at the show and ask yourself, okay, what are its overlying themes? You can see those. That's not what we mean by this show doesn't make sense. It just narratively doesn't make sense. There's no story. You're not following consecutive plot lines that are amounting to anything or linking to anything. This is all about the message. This is an entirely a message show, which I can definitely see why that, you know, people would be angry about that. I mean, you can see it now in things, you know, in movies and television now that have some really ham-handed, themes and messages to them, and people are upset. Like, I get that. I think The Prisoner is still a little less ham-handed than some of the stuff that we're getting now in 2020. But yeah, it's still pretty, you know, simple concept. And again, we're talking about Patrick McGoohan, who is, as we've said, devout Catholic. Only thing he ever did was, you know, drink and he probably didn't even curse, and I guess evidently fight. He had no problem with hitting people.
He was probably a lovingly serial abuser.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
Not to defile his grave or cast aspersions, but come on, Sean Connery.
There's some traits that are easily equated to that personality type. Yeah. Unfortunately.
Oh boy, what a show.
Yep, but we're here. We did it. You can find me on Twitter at WriterJessFired, and if you want to hear me talking about movies, you can find me on your other show, Chris, The Culture Cast. I'm on there twice a month talking movies. Every month is a different theme. And if you're into spooky stuff, true crime, horror culture, you can find Chris and I both at the Scary Stories We Tell podcast. And then I plug everything else on Twitter that I do. So,
as for myself, follow me on Twitter, casualty_Chris, oneseasonshow.com, at oneseasonshow. That's where you can find all the other seasons of this show that we've done. Mustaches and Martinis provided the music for this season of the One Season Show. And make sure to check us out on Be Seeing You.